Hi, Brady here. Um, for this topic of universal design for learning, I thought I'd try to do something a little bit different from what everybody else is probably going to be doing, while still trying to, of course, meet all the criteria as to what I'm supposed to be talking about in this assignment. And so I thought I would talk about some of the ways I've started to look at universal design for learning in my work. And really, this topic, I had been, I'll talk a little bit about my history with UDL. I had been uh, interested in working with individuals with disabilities for a long time. Now, in my undergrad, I worked with children with severe disabilities of all kinds. Um, and then working in library environments, that was something my very earliest professional interests in research work had to do with physical accessibility for individuals with disabilities, or kind of social acceptance of individuals with disabilities in those kinds of information environments. I was introduced more to the topic of UDL in my master's program from Dr. Valenti, who used to work um, in the IT department. Um, and she integrates some of these concepts in her class. I learned more from myself and from working with Ting, in her IDT background and her experience working with individuals with disabilities. One thing led to another, and this kind of became an interest of mine. Um, and I still think I'm learning a lot about it, of course, through this class and throughout my own readings as well. Um, but I thought some of the an interesting way perhaps of talking about the topic of UDL that would be somewhat different from what I've done before, because I am trying to talk about these topics in different ways each assignment, kind of push myself to think differently and think about different ways to teach things. Um, is to talk about some of the resources I've found and some of the research I've done that incorporates universal design for learning as the main focus. So I thought I'd talk first about this presentation I did this summer at the library instruction conference in Minneapolis. Um, Basically, this topic was brought to my attention when I was working on the book with Ting about accessibility in distance education. One of the reviewers for the book, I guess you could call him, pointed out that an often overlooked area of open educational resources is accessibility in open educational resources. Um, you know, OER is great for saving students money, for ensuring everyone has access to the text needed to perform well in the course. But we don't want to overlook accessibility when doing that. It's something that the traditional publishers, your Springer, Routledge, Taylor and Francis, whatever, all those organizations do is they have a policy in place to ensure that their resources are accessible, including their online resources are accessible according to WCAG 2.1 standards. That's not necessarily the case with OER. There are some OER repositories that are slowly growing, certainly don't cover every topic, that are putting their resources through evaluation criteria to make sure they meet UDL guidelines. But that, again, that's by no means the standard with OER currently. So what I did here was just a very limited study. Is basically, you call it a pilot study or a proof of concept. And so I looked at the most popular OER, likely is OER Commons, and probably the biggest topic within librarianship right now, at least in the university setting, is information literacy, teaching people how to find information resources by searching databases, you know, distinguishing fake news from fact, what clues are there that a source is reliable, those kinds of things that are generally offered to like freshman level students, but might be offered in different classes throughout your undergraduate or graduate career as well. And so I looked at resources specifically on the topic of information literacy and used the UDL criteria, which I have here. Might be a little blurry because I did have to make it quite small to fit on the poster, but I just wanted to give the people that were attending my poster presentation a bit of an idea of what UDL is, with providing multiple means of engaging with the content, providing multiple ways of representing the content, and multiple ways for students to express their knowledge of the content, essentially. And you'll see under each of these, there's 3 different criteria, I guess. I'm not sure the official term. I should probably look that up. 3 criteria, and then there's several sub-criteria underneath each of these. And so what I did in my research is I actually used a tool I'll show in a minute that kind of makes it easy to evaluate online resources. But essentially what it does is it ensures compliance with all of these sub-guidelines here, these sub-criteria that combine to make these 3 main elements that describe UDL compliance. And so I have here all of these items, or at least the ones that I thought had the most interesting findings. Really the most problematic thing with UDL, and sometimes overlooked, because when we talk about universal design or universal design for learning, I think the focus, and not in any problematic way, probably good that we think about those who have a disability, but part of what UDL is as well is to make sure individuals who maybe don't speak English as their primary language, maybe just have a different way of consuming information that we wouldn't necessarily classify as a disability, make sure that they still are able to grasp the information that they need to. So some of the findings actually kind of vet that out as far as providing understanding across languages. We see here that actually auditory information, offering alternatives for auditory information, is very limited in the OER that were examined. That means essentially is there's no transcript or no closed captioning provided for a video, for instance. Very limited as far as customizing the display of the information, and often constructed to limit your ability to work with others. And of course there are some instances where that needs to be limited because we want to test your knowledge, but in the instances where it is learning, acquiring the information, acquiring the knowledge, and you think there's likely to be the opportunity for collaboration or learning together with others, that tended to be very restrictive based on the design of the module. And so my findings were that 77% of the resources in OER Commons had some kind of major accessibility problem, which I kind of made the definition here that there was unsatisfactory across multiple criteria. Again, some of the problems, they tended to cause, or had the potential to cause, difficulties for individuals with vision or hearing loss, or physical or learning impairments. In particular, there are quite a few that would probably be problematic for individuals who have ADD, ADHD have trouble focusing on something that's very monotonous, that's very text-based over a long period of time, that doesn't allow time for breaks from the content. That can be a very big problem that people, when you make this open to the public to design these resources, they may not think about concepts like that. Oh, somebody might need to take a break. I can't make this module so that it's going to be an hour long with no breakup for people to take a rest and let their mind rest and let their mind wander a little bit. As part of this, I actually created a tutorial which is very similar to what we'd be doing for the assignments in this class so far. In fact, it's basically I could have submitted it as the assignment if I wasn't concerned about plagiarism, but the link's there, so I guess it could be considered a supplement for what I'm talking about here, and more focused on talking about what UDL is, as well as giving a little bit of an overview like I am here about the specific context in which it's occurring. But I also wanted to talk briefly about the resource I use, and I think this is a really excellent resource that's produced by the Center on Online Learning and Students with Disabilities, which is affiliated with the University of Kansas. It's located in Lawrence, so it's also local, so I like promoting it for that reason as well. There's some other tools that are similar to this, but you know, you gotta support the local one if you think it's worth supporting. And so they have this UDL scan tool. When you hear a scan tool, sometimes I hate how people term things, what people used to call things, because scan tool makes it seem like it's some very advanced technology to me that might be intimidating for somebody who's not really tech savvy. But really what it is it's a Google form, and so when you click and download this Google form from this link here, it looks like this, and you're basically going to populate the information on this and fill it out, and it's going to present you with a score that lets you know if each of these criteria in the UDL guidelines is met. So that's what I actually used to derive the percentages I provided in that study, that small study I did. And even better is that they have videos here to walk you step by step through the entire process. And of course, these are made accessible. They have captioning, and so they're helpful in that way as well. What this looks like, I'll just populate this with some random information here, just because I want to go into the actual questions real quick and talk about that briefly. Doesn't matter. So it looks like this, and it has different sections and subsections like the UDL guidelines, but instead of using some of these vague terms that are used for the guidelines themselves, offer ways of customizing the display of information, leaving you to interpret what that means. The tool actually asks more specific questions, like, does this product include any selectable text? And that way, this is a question you're more likely to be able to accurately answer than this vague, ambiguous question up here. And if you don't know what that means, then you're able to hit don't know, and it's still able to get, as long as you don't hit it too much, fairly accurate assessment of whether this is going to be an accessible tool or not. And so, it just continues through this process, through all these questions. There are a bunch of questions, and that is the one limitation of this tool, I think, is it can very easily take 20 to 30 minutes to go through this tool while you're assessing a module or something on Canvas or whatever. If you're going to upload something onto there, it can be a little time intensive, but the results it produces are fairly accurate to the UDL guidelines. And so I wanted to talk about UDL in that way, kind of build upon, show that my knowledge maybe has advanced even beyond just understanding what the guidelines are, but trying myself to evaluate some resources and see if they meet the UDL standards, and applying what I know as far as these tools in order to do that. I think this is something that a lot of educators could benefit from greatly. So I've tried my best to disseminate information about it, and will continue to do so as much as possible. In fact, I'm doing a short presentation where I'll be talking about this tool here for an online conference in a month, I guess, month from now. So anyways, that's kind of my overview discussion assignment for UDL. Thanks for listening.